There it is. Thank you. Okay, so I guess we're ready.
Okay, want me to go ahead and start the first video, the CEAP background video?
Yes.
Okay, will do. Give me.
We don't have sound, Joseph.
You'll have to stop the screen share and then click the optimize button, and then you should be good.
Hi, I'm Evelyn Steglick. I'm with the NRCS, and I'm the CEAP Cropland Modeling Team Leader. Our team will be using the data that is being collected with this survey. The focus of this presentation is to give you some background of the CEAP project as well as why it is so important to participate in this survey. Hopefully, the presentation will give you a good understanding The Natural Resource Conservation Service, or NRCS, is an agency of the USDA, formerly known as the Soil Conservation Service, or SCS. Our mission is to provide financial and technical assistance to farmers and ranchers to implement conservation solutions to protect natural resources that ultimately help keep their operations sustainable and productive to feed our growing world. NRCS is focused on the American farmer and rancher, providing voluntary one-on-one personalized assistance to help them find the best solutions to meet their conservation needs and goals. Another acronym you might hear is NRI, which stands for the National Resources Inventory. The NRI includes an assessment of land cover, soil erosion, and other natural resource characteristics that provide valuable data for environmental management and conservation efforts. The NRI is conducted by NRCS in cooperation with ISU's Center for Survey Statistics and Methodology. The assessment collects and produces scientifically credible information on the status, condition, and trends of land, soil, and water, and other related natural resources on the nation's non-federal land. So it gives us an estimate of things like the loss of farmland to development, soil erosion in relation to land characteristics, and wetland changes in relation to agriculture. It also allows for regular resource appraisals on the effectiveness of conservation practices, as well as agricultural technologies, techniques, and management practices. The CEAP modeling team uses data collected through the NRI as input for our process-based crop simulation model for estimation of the edge-of-field nutrient and soil losses. I have mentioned CEAP a few times. CEAP is the Conservation Effects Assessment Project, which is a multi-agency effort led by NRCS to quantify the effects of conservation on soil and nutrient loss, as well as soil health and water quality on working lands in the U.S. The results of the assessments are used to guide conservation program development and assist conservation planners in identifying high conservation need areas. The CEAP assessment supports conservationists, producers, and partners in selecting the most effective conservation alternatives and management practices, all backed by data and science. The overall purpose of the CEAP project is to quantify the benefits we're receiving from the conservation activities that are implemented on working lands, whether those are funded through NRCS and provided with technical assistance or not. Our survey is unique in that it captures both conservation activities that farmers may be doing through financial assistance with NRCS, but also conservation that they are implementing with their own capital or through state or local conservation efforts. Having this information helps us at NRCS do a couple of things. For one, we can estimate the impacts or effects of the conservation activities on the landscape and get a sense of how much bang for the buck we're getting when we spend program dollars to address resource concerns. We can also identify potential improvements to our programs or shift our priorities to try to address different resource concerns or different needs that farmers are telling us they have. We can also use this information to develop targeted and measurable goals for the future. For many of you, this may be the first time you've heard of CEAP, but actually it's been happening for more than 20 years now. It was initiated as a project in 2002 as part of the 2002 Farm Bill, with the main goal of providing additional accountability for the conservation program funding that was provided in the Farm Bill. At that time, we would often speak about things in terms of feet of a practice built or how many acres of this or that practice we've put on the ground, but rarely were we able to say things like, as a result of this $1 million of federal conservation program funding, we improved water quality by this amount, or we reduced sediment and nutrient losses from farm fields by this amount. And that's really the key to what we're trying to get at with the work that we do in CEAP. After the initiation in 2002, we were able to implement our very first CEAP survey from 2003 to 2006. That first assessment was a huge success, so we were granted funding to complete our second survey, the CEAP 3 survey, from 2015 to 2016. Between those two survey periods, we revisited a couple of special emphasis areas, such as the Western Lake Erie Basin and the Chesapeake Bay in 2011 and in 2012. In 2013 and 2014, we resurveyed the California, Central Valley, and St. Francis special emphasis areas, which eventually were grouped into the CEAP2 analysis to prevent respondent survey overburden. CEAP2 was the first time we had the ability to compare the results from two time periods, which allowed us to see the direction we were headed with various resource concerns. This also resulted in a redirection and reemphasis of some of our conservation efforts to better address water quality concerns. We are currently in the process of conducting our CEAP3 survey, which is being administered between 2024 and 2026, and will give us yet another decade of conservation practice data to compare over time. So why is CEAP so important? There are a couple of main reasons why we think that CEAP is important as a project, and why this survey and the data collection that you all are doing is so important. The first is that it gives producers the opportunity to give us an accurate and complete picture of the conservation practices they're using on their lands to improve the production and sustainability of their operation. This gives them an opportunity to tell their story, instead of us either guessing at or using other kinds of data like NRCS program participation data. And we're able to get this information straight from the people who are doing the activities. Collecting our data this way and using it in our model practices establishes our scientific understanding of what effects conservation practices have at both the regional and watershed scale. And it also gives us that accountability piece where we can provide Congress and policymakers who are allocating taxpayer funding with information they'll need to fund those conservation programs that ultimately benefit our landowners. CEAP is actually comprised of 5 components, including wetland, watershed, grazing land, wildlife, and cropland. The cropland component is, however, the only one that does a national assessment of conservation efforts through the CEAP Farmer Survey. The CEAP cropland modeling team uses the data collected in the survey as input into our process-based crop simulation models to estimate the losses and benefits as a result of implementation of conservation across the nation's working land. Our modeling efforts are very similar to weather forecast models we are all familiar with. We input known data collected from the operators and obtained from other data sources and pair it with proven scientific knowledge to produce estimates of the effects of the practices currently in place. We then aggregate the results to the watershed, regional, or even national level to provide a report card of how well we are addressing our resource concerns and where we can improve our efforts. When we receive the data, our modeling processes use that survey data with a modeling approach to estimate conservation benefits and edge of field losses. Each survey that we collect gives us a 3-year snapshot of all the conservation and management practices that are being carried out at that given point. That data, as you know, includes all of the field operations, tillage, cropping history, and conservation practice adoption, like cover crops use, tillage use, structural practices like terraces and buffers, chemical applications, and other agricultural practice data. This level of detailed data allows us to simulate all of the day-to-day activities that are happening on that point. And through that modeling simulation, we're able to estimate the edge of field sediment and nutrient losses. This allows us to take a look at the amount of sediment loss from the field, the amount of erosion that's happening, or the amount of nitrogen or phosphorus that's lost at either the surface level or subsurface level. We can assess these findings at the national or regional level, or even group by crop rotation, conservation practice profile, or other aggregations to provide guidance to conservationists, producers, and other agricultural stakeholders, enabling them to make educated decisions about the resource concerns on those farms. We estimate these conservation benefits in a couple of different model simulation types. The first simulation that we do is the simulation of just exactly what is happening on the field based on the data we receive from the survey. That's our baseline simulation, and it includes all of the management and practices just as reported by the farmers. That will give us an idea of what is currently happening on the landscape in terms of sediment and nutrient losses. This scenario is also what allows us to compare changes over time. So we can look back at our CEAP1 and CEAP2 and now our CEAP3 results and are able to see the changes between those time periods to measure progress in those conservation benefits over time. But if we want to compare this survey's information to either what would be happening if there was less conservation on the landscape or what could be happening if there was more conservation on the landscape, we have to use alternative scenarios. One of those scenarios simulates the same exact points with the removal of all the conservation practices without removing access to modern technology and keeping as minimal conservation as possible on the landscape. By comparing this to our baseline scenario, we can quantify the benefits achieved by the current conservation efforts. Our other major alternative scenario paints a full treatment picture by adding conservation activity above what is reported in the survey based on characteristics of the field. And that helps us to see how far we have to go, or how far we could possibly go with conservation on the landscape. With this, we can adjust our expectations for what is possible with voluntary conservation programs and give us an idea, if we apply some economic data, of how much money it would cost to get full treatment on this landscape, or what expectations may be reasonable for a given funding amount. We report our outcomes in a couple of different ways. The first is that we can look at just how the conservation practices change between surveys, and that's directly from the data collected in the survey. We can basically take those survey responses, and from that, without any modeling, we can report on structural practice and conservation tillage adoption. We can also report on things such as how many folks were using conservation crop rotations, how many acres use cover crops in their rotations. We also have information about irrigation, nutrient management, and manure application trends. We can get information about water sources or irrigation efficiency, and the application method, rate, and timing of fertilizers and manure, all directly from the survey. This information also helps us explain some of our modeling results. From our modeling results, we have an additional piece of information about how conservation adoption affects resource concerns. Resource concerns are what we call the different things that we're worried about along the landscape. Things like erosion, both wind and water, sediment loss at the edge of field, surface nitrogen loss, subsurface nitrogen loss, total phosphorus and soluble phosphorus losses, as well as soil carbon trends. Whether a field was gaining or losing soil carbon due to the management practices carried out on the field. CEAP findings are used in a variety of ways. Our different stakeholders are often looking for different things from the data we publish. Our cropland farmers might use the data to inform some of their on-the-ground decisions. One example of a way we were able to convert some of these findings into usable information for producers was by calculating the potential average fuel use savings when producers used no-till instead of conventional tillage. we estimated that there is about a 3.6 gallon per acre fuel savings when a producer transitions from conventional to no-till. And that's one piece of information that helps producers identify their bottom line and how conservation practices may influence that. Our NRCS stakeholders, which might include our state and county offices and our conservation partners, are using the data in a different way to help evaluate the outcomes associated with current conservation and guide future efforts and initiatives to maximize impact. We also distribute our findings in a number of different ways. We work closely with our communication people to try to hit as many targets as possible with this data that we have collected. Our first release of CEAP2 data was a national scale report that included a full selection of data analyses from both the survey itself on those conservation practice adoption trends and our modeling efforts to tie those to our nutrient and sediment losses, giving us a full picture of the different benefits that we're receiving from conservation practices that are on the landscape. That report was released in March of 2022, and it's available online now, along with summaries at different links for individuals who may have different objectives to seek from the findings. One interesting note that may help to influence people in whether or not to take the survey is an example of how the findings from CEAP2 were used by NRCS. One of the findings from this survey was that even though we're doing really good with adoption of conservation tillage and other soil health practices like cover crops and conservation crop rotations, there was a decrease in incorporation of nutrients, possibly tied to the shift in adoption of conservation tillage over conventional tillage. As a result of that, there were more subsurface losses of nitrogen and phosphorus estimated for CEAP2 than there were for the CEAP1 time period. This finding directed a lot of attention back toward nutrient management for the agency, which led to the SMART nutrient management program, which revitalized a push for those 4 R's of nutrient management, which include the right source, the right method, the right rate, and the right timing. Plus, we added the emphasis on the site-specific assessment of needs at a given site. So those were some emphasis areas that we weren't capturing previously that now have turned the course as a result of the data that we collected in our last CEAP survey. We're also distributing these findings in other ways, including a set of regional reports at the CEAP production region scale. We have also created state-specific resources that we share with our NRCS conservationists and other state agricultural agencies. And we have also combined the data that we have behind the scenes with other conservation planning data that can help NRCS conservationists target the areas in need of additional conservation measures and the acres that might be undertreated for specific resource concerns. We can pinpoint those on the map and help influence where funding goes across the country. These last couple of slides will touch on some points that will hopefully motivate producers to participate in the survey. This first slide is sort of an emphasis on what we aren't doing with the survey that may help alleviate some fears and concerns. First, I want to reemphasize that, of course, our survey responses are completely confidential and that we will never be used on an individual basis or a way that an individual operator could be identified. It's also important to remember that NRCS is not a regulatory agency. Unfortunately, sometimes governmental agencies get lumped together as one big entity, but unlike other agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency, we are here for voluntary conservation and voluntary conservation alone. We're certainly not looking to point any fingers or catch bad actors. The data that we collect will never be shared or used in that way either. And finally, we're not in the business of selling anything. Of course, NRCS is in the business of selling conservation, but this survey is data collection alone. The data will be collected without any influence for any particular conservation objectives and without shame or judgment. Operators won't be contacted after the survey and asked to operate any differently. If folks are interested in NRCS benefits, you can certainly link them up with an NRCS local office, but we're not immediately passing that information back and forth to saying, oh, well, Farmer John didn't do so well this year, and maybe he needs to implement some conservation. That is not what we are doing with this survey. Some of the more positive, proactive reasons that could entice producers to participate in the survey include having a chance for them to tell their story. I know farmers get pulled into the news all sorts of ways about how their actions have caused the algal blooms in lakes or harmed an ecosystem, but this is an excellent opportunity for them to tell us about the good work they are doing on their farms to protect our natural resources and counter the claims against them. They might also want to share information about the work they are doing with NRCS and the difference it's made on their farms, and how they would also like to maybe continue to do more conservation. It is also true that the findings of this survey help inform the programs that we offer at NRCS. The farmers' stories may help us be able to dedicate more money to certain conservation programs, like in the case of nutrient management, or they may help to tailor those more to farmer needs, like in the case of an increased erosion story, where folks are losing all of their topsoil in a given area and need more support on that resource concern. And then finally, the findings help to improve the effectiveness of the practice and implementation that we're doing to make sure that those are the most effective solutions for addressing the resource concerns. I hope this presentation provided you with an understanding of the Conservation Effects Assessment Project and why it is so important to participate in this survey. The data collected in this survey help us help the farmers and ranchers of America, and that's our #1 goal, putting farmers first. Thank you for the work that you are doing to get this survey data collected. We really appreciate the data that we receive from this tremendous effort, and we're happy to help in any way we can.
All right. So do we have any questions so far? You can either put it in chat or do the raise hand option. And I wanted to take this time, we have from NRCS, Evelyn and Chris with us also today. So wanted to quickly mention that.
Yes, so hello, I'm Evelyn Steglick. I am the acting CEAP modeling team leader. So it's the CEAP modeling team that uses this data that you all are collecting, and we greatly appreciate all the efforts you're doing. I know your job is not always the easiest. I know you meet some interesting people, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. So I appreciate all the work that you're doing to go out and talk with these farmers and gather the data that we are asking for. This survey is really important to us. It is truthfully our livelihood. Without this data, we can't continue to function. And it's also very important for us. The data that we collect helps us report to Congress and to you also as taxpayers, and to the general public, about how we are spending the taxpayer dollars and the benefits that we are getting through this funding. So that is very important to us, and it is important also to our agency, to USDA, and to the total administration. So again, thank you for all that you've done and will be doing for us. I'll pass it over to Chris.
Thank you, Evelyn. And hello, everyone. I'm Chris Lester. I'm also with NRCS, the CEAP modeling team. And mainly, I just want to echo our appreciation, as Evelyn has mentioned, all world of thanks to all the employees at NASDA that put this together, and NAS and all the enumerators that's joined us today. We can't emphasize how important the survey is, and the success of it is kind of in your hands moving forward. And we do not have a CEAP cropland assessment without you in this effort. So I just want to take a moment to thank you for all you do, and wish you the best of luck in 2025.
All right, thank you. We did have one question that came up, and so the question is, what does it mean we are sharing our story when we participate? Would somebody from NRCS or NAS like to touch that one?
Yeah, I'll take that. So definitely, when we say that it gives the farmers and producers a chance to tell their story is, we know that farmers are doing conservation on a voluntary basis. They're not all of them are working directly with NRCS. Some of them may have worked with NRCS in the past, or maybe they see work that their neighbors have done with NRCS, and they're doing it on their own through, and they're paying for it out of their own funding or whatever. And so we want to know about the good that they're doing. And so it's their chance to tell us about this good, so that we can give them the credit for doing that, and what it's doing for the environment and helping to maintain their operations and keep them sustainable and productive. And it's keeping those operations productive is important for the whole world, essentially, because they are helping feed us. So that's, we just want them to be able to tell us about the good that they're doing and the efforts that they are doing, to keep the world fed, essentially.
All right, thanks. We have one more question here. A common roadblock to enumerate this survey is the farmer's reaction to its length and detail. Might there be a way to minimize the time they spend with us?
Well, one thing I would definitely, if when you go out to do the screening, let them know that there is the potential that you will be back if their point is, or their farm is selected, their field is selected, and ask them to have their records available. So, what their fertilizer records were for the past 3 years, if they apply manure, also if they can kind of have a record of what their tillage practices, when they tilled, when they planted, the crops they planted, when they harvested, those types of things. If they can have all of that ready, it'll make things go so much quicker. And you're not sitting there waiting for them. They're kind of on the spot trying to think of, what they did for the past 3 years, which, that can be difficult in itself, just trying to remember what you did yesterday. So, it's, if you can make them aware that you will probably be coming back. And then obviously when you do schedule a time to go back to do the main surveys, to remind them about, have these records available and have that ready so that you can get through it a lot quicker.
Yeah, and Gene, I just wanted to say, there's also some comments, or there's a video at the end of our last video for the training today that has some enumerator points of view on how to do that very thing, and so we will be covering that.
All right, thank you. I think we're ready to go ahead and start the next video. Joseph, you'd like to fire it up?
Hello, everyone. My name is Joseph Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about what tools you have at your disposal to conduct Phase 1 of the CEAP survey. Let's get started. So depending on when you are watching this, you either have already received or will receive a packet containing the following items: an FSA name and address listing and a map for each of your points, a supply of operator ID cards, we'll talk more about these later, some blank Phase 1 questionnaires, a supply of door hangers, and some thank you postcards. Important to note, materials for Phase 2 will be distributed at a later date. So let's start off by talking about these FSA name and address listings. These are listings of all individuals who have registered that land with FSA in the last 2 years. This represents our best guess of who the operator is. Past experience has shown that this best guess is pretty good at identifying people who are associated with the land, but it's important that we get the operator of the land. Remember, our definition of operator is the person making day-to-day decisions about the land. You might have to do some detective work to ferret out who the operator actually is. So I can't really show you a picture of an FSA name and address listing because it's basically all PII. But one thing to note is that at the top of the sheet, you will find the state and county, as well as the NRI point ID. Compare that point ID to the point ID listed on the map to make sure all the paperwork matches. So remember, some points may only have a corporation or an LLC or something like that listed. That's probably not the primary operator. We want to find out who is making day-to-day decisions for the land. Those of you who worked phase 2 of CEAP know that that's a pretty intensive questionnaire. We need to identify the person best able to respond to that phase 2 questionnaire, and that person is most likely the primary operator. To help you in this quest, keep an eye on the FSA name type column. OP means the person listed is who FSA has as the operator. OO means FSA has them listed as the owner operator. OT is other, and OW is owner only. Likely OT and OW are not the primary operators. It is important to note that the person FSA has listed as the operator may not necessarily be the person making day-to-day decisions for the land. Us and FSA have different definitions for the word operator. Okay, let's move on a bit and talk about these operator ID cards pictured here. Operator ID cards are a business card size and have a unique 9-digit number. They are given to every operator, but important to note that no matter how many points an operator may have, they should only have one operator ID card. The purpose of these cards is to ensure that every operator only has 1 point selected for phase 2. Using the operator ID cards is a simple 3-step process. Briefly stated, the steps are 1, give them the card, 2, record the number on the card, and 3, they keep the card. Let's break these down a little bit. So the first step is always to ask if the operator has already been interviewed for CEAP this year and thus already has an ID card. That this year bit is important since they may have been interviewed for last year's CEAP. Maybe they just have a really good memory. Step 2, each time you interview a new operator, that is an operator who does not yet have an ID card, you will give them a card and record that unique 9-digit number into the NRI screener website. We'll show what that looks like later. Make sure that number is saved in the screener. You can always retrieve it later from the screening website. Step 3, tell the operator to keep the card you present, to keep the card and to present it to any other enumerator, or maybe even you, when they are interviewed for a different point later. One great idea is to suggest that the operator take a picture of the card with their phone so they can't lose it. So these operator ID cards are pretty important. They're the only way we have to link multiple points to one operator. Very important to note, these are not pre-assigned to the points, but once you enter that 9-digit number into the screener, that number will become associated with the operator. Double check, remind the operator that it's very important that they do not lose their card. We have seen some producers show up as the operator for 11 or more NRI points. So these cards are really important so they don't get selected for 11 or more phase 2 questionnaires. Nobody wants to do that. So here's what the questions in the screener look like and how you fill them out if the operator has not been contacted before and therefore does not yet have an operator ID card. Make sure you enter and validate the operator ID number in the screener before giving them that card. Then, once you've done that, go ahead and give them the operator ID card. Ask them to hold on to it until the screening phase is over. Now, in this scenario, the operator has been contacted before and does have an operator ID card. Enter and validate the operator ID number in the screener. Although you can't see it here, the operator's 2 points are now linked in the screener system. While the operator may have multiple points that make them eligible for the phase 2 survey, they will only be asked to complete 1 survey for 1 of their points. The eligible point will be selected by NRCS/Iowa State. NASDA and NAS are not in the business of selecting what point they get questions about. So while we're on the subject of the screener website, Make sure you get in and practice on the purple trainer screening website until July 31st. On August 1st, this training website will close and only the white production website will be available. So make sure you get your practice in before August. Okay, so how about these blank phase one questionnaires? Well, these are a backup only, and they're just there in case you run into technical troubles in the field. Remember, all data needs to be entered into the screening website. These backup blank questionnaires should not be mailed anywhere. Okay, some important dates for you to keep in mind. Data collection takes place August 1st through September 26th. So now hopefully you have a good grasp of the tools you have available to complete CEAP Phase 1. Good luck out there.
All right. So, do we have any questions so far? We had a couple come across chat, and it says we had copies of the questionnaires. Many times a farmer will say, I have time right now. Is there any way we could get copies? And you're referring to phase two. And the answer to that was basically at that we just don't know what's going to be in phase two yet. And so no, they don't have the phase two survey. Uh, they don't hand it out until after the phase one is done. And then we had another question just talking about the training. And the reason for this is just because we wanted to ensure that all regions got the exact same training. And that's really hard to do when you do it live and things kind of veer off topic. So doing it this way ensures continuity across all the trainings. Is there any other questions?
Yeah,
am
I
unable to
have
find.
one. This is
Okay, go
John.
ahead.
Uh, I last year when I did this for the first time, I never ran across people even having getting a card before. Have we run into this in general? Have people run into where the operator has been contacted? I never did, so I was just curious. Nothing else.
That would be a question for somebody from NAS or NRCS.
Yeah, I can jump in, or Joseph, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, I
But
was gonna
yes,
say, go
go for
ahead,
it.
Jeff.
Go ahead, Joseph.
Okay, sorry. We definitely had many operators who were selected for multiple fields, but who were interviewed for multiple points, especially larger operators who have a ton of acreage. Like that it's a random sample, it's a random chance of these X's being placed. So it's entirely possible that one operator could have multiple points show up. So yeah, these operator cards do come into play pretty often. Maybe just not in your specific, maybe not in your local area. Maybe you have smaller producers in your area. I'm just guessing here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good question.
All right, we've had a few other questions pop up. Let's see, make sure I haven't skipped any. I am unable to find the practice icon on my iPad, or how do I find it? That's a question for your trainer. And in this case, trainer's already reached out to him. But you would want to reach out to your trainer for any questions in regards to issues with locating the links to the not only training side, but production side of the um app. Is CEAP to be conducted in person? Oh, there it went. Is CEAP to be conducted in person? You can do some work via the phone, but yes, I believe it will have to be conducted in person to access the field. Joseph, is that correct?
That's a true statement, and I think also your presentation at the end, or at least the other ADs, mentioned like you have a certain number of visits out into the field, and then maybe you try and follow up with the phone, and then final visits again in the field. But I'll let you cover the specific details of that. But we will be covering that towards the end of the training. Good question.
Thank you. Um, let's see, we got that. Will phase two be in-person training? Now that one I do not know the answer to. Um, Debbie, do you know what the plans are for phase two training?
I'll
Oh,
jump in
never
if
mind.
Debbie isn't available. I'm not positive that the NASDA has decided the format for its phase two trainings, but everything that I have heard so far it would indicate similar trainings to this. I've not heard any indication of in-person trainings, but that's me from NAS speaking for NASDA, which is I'm not really supposed to be doing. So there might be a different answer coming out from NASDA at a later date.
Yes, we will get a specific answer out on that one. Didn't know we had a training video. Where do we find them? Okay, we got that covered. The link provided. When will we receive our packets and see our workload in Cappy? That has been a very common question. Do
Yep.
y'all happen to know when the packets are going to get mailed out? I know they
Yeah,
were kind of
I can
arranged.
handle that one. So right now our print mail center is working on putting those packets together. That's also the reason that the CAPI assignments aren't showing right now. We wanted to make sure that we could get all the assignments as they stood mailed out. So as soon as they are done assembling those packets, we should be turning those CAPI back on, so you'll be able to see them in your iPads. And I just talked to the PMC this morning, the Print Mail Center, and we are hopeful that some of the packets will start being mailed out in the next day or two. But we expect all of them to be in hand before August 1.
All right, thank you. What do we do if they don't want to meet in person but want to do the survey over the phone? Somebody from NRCS want to touch on that one?
Well, if we're talking about phase one and later on in, I think one of the later videos, they actually touch on doing the screening over the phone and the fact that it's a little bit difficult to do the screener over the phone because you're trying to draw out that boundary of the field. And so it might be difficult to try to, just coordinate with the producer to try to figure out where those boundaries are. So that part might be difficult. We prefer doing this phase two in person. But if the only way that you can get that survey is over the phone, I would rather that than not have it at all. So if it can be effective over the phone, I would prefer to have these in person. Just you can have a better conversation, I think, with the producer.
All right, thank you. All right, well, that touches on all of the seat questions. Joseph, you ready to continue?
Definitely. And don't forget, this is the one we need to pause the recording over because this is the one that shows PII.
All right, thank you. So be thinking of any questions that you have. We did have a few that had popped up. One question off topic, but I'll go ahead and address it. Has the Zoom meeting from last week been updated? That is in reference to the all hands meeting that we held, little meet and greet. Yes, it has. We got it uploaded this morning, and I have sent the link out to the managers, and they will distribute it for those well, to everybody. Uh, Another question. Are we not taking real maps with us? Somebody from NRCS or NAS, are y'all providing any type of a paper map, or is this all going to be on the app?
So every every point will come with a paper map that will help you to get the point drawn off. What we recommend is you get the operator to draw off the on the paper map. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. You get the operator to draw off on the paper map, and then you go into the NRI screener to draw off the map into the NRI system. That pattern seems to work really well. Rather than you trying to draw off the point when the NRI system in front of the operator. It's a little finicky, and unless you're practiced at it, it can be a little, it's just easier to have the operator draw it off on the paper map, and then you transfer it later. Hope that
All right,
answers the
thanks.
question.
And then the last question we have is, if a point lies in a field that is a smaller part of a larger field that is broken up by topography, do we take the entirety of the field as defined by the operator, or just the segment that the point is in?
I can
Who
hit
would
that one
like?
too, unless somebody else wants to. This next video is going to cover this and many other situations. I think if you still have a question after this next video, then repost it, and we'll. But I'm pretty sure this next video answers it very well.
All right, thanks. And then we had one question. Last question was, what about the maps we used before?
I'm not sure what exactly, if you're referring to 2024 maps, those should be shredded. Those are not relevant to this year's survey at all. I think those were supposed to have been destroyed at the end of data collection last year.
Yes, actually, if you're in possession of them, let your coach or manager know so we can get them sent to a location for disposal. All right. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. All right. Go ahead and start up our next.
Hi everyone, my name is Angela. In this presentation, we'll highlight common conservation practices you may encounter while completing CEAP surveys and how to navigate challenging situations. First, we are going to start with field buffers and field filter strip, which are areas of permanent vegetation located within the field with a goal of directing and controlling water flow. Another conservation practice you may encounter are grassed waterways. And as you can see from the flashing arrow, grassed waterways will be found within the field with the goal of slowing and directing water. Riparian buffers will be found along the body of water, stream, river, lake. The examples here are of a tree buffer at the top and a grass buffer at the bottom. And a riparian buffer is another conservation practice with many benefits, such as providing habitat and controlling water movement. Field borders, also known as windbreaks, establish around the perimeter of the field to control soil erosion from wind or water. The final conservation practice I will mention is terrace or strip cropping. That practice is commonly found in hilly areas or places where the slope of the land will lead to soil erosion. The crop plantings will follow the contour of the land. Now that we have discussed several conservation practices you may encounter, we will transition to lessons learned from previous CEAP screening surveys. The CEAP sample is designed to provide coverage of cultivated fields in the United States. The purpose of the survey is to allow NRCS to determine land management and conservation practices used in these areas. The first situation we will discuss is continuous conservation cover, such as CRP. The respondent tells you the selected field marked with the X is enrolled in CRP for at least the last 3 years. Following the routing in the NRI application, this field is not planted to a crop, the field is not idle land, and answering these questions in the NRI application for the CRP field will mark the point to be ineligible for follow-ons. Changing that situation slightly, what happens when the field cropped within the last 3 years, then was enrolled in CRP? Follow the same NRI application screener question routings as the previous situation, where the field was enrolled in CRP for all 3 years. CRP in the current year, regardless of what happened to the field in the previous 2 years, will result in the field being ineligible for the Phase 2 survey. Moving to another CRP scenario, X is in a field planted to a crop adjacent to the field is CRP. Where is the field boundary drawn? What is included? Let's look at this situation from different angles. The first case we're going to look at is the NRI point. The X falls in the field planted to a crop. Adjacent CRP field is separated by a ditch that cannot be crossed by equipment. In this example, the conservation practice on the left is separated from the cropped field on the right by this large impassable ditch. When this happens, the CRP and cropped field are clearly separated and should be treated individually. In this situation, the field boundary should be drawn around the selected crop field in the ditch or bank buffer. Case 2 is the same 2 fields as we just discussed, only the opposite field is selected. The NRI point falls in the CRP field. The adjacent crop field, separated by that same ditch, cannot be crossed and accessed by equipment. Regardless of if the ditch or stream is present, when the NRI point, that X, falls in a CRP field, do not include an adjacent cropped field in that field boundary drawing. The CRP field is a selected field and the NRI application should be completed based on that field. Another slight change to that scenario where the selected field is planted to a crop and the CRP is in the adjacent field. And note, there is nothing separating them. They're right next to each other. So in this situation where the selected crop field on the left is directly adjacent to CRP, you would include the entire CRP area when drawing the field boundary as the conservation area. Yet another slight variation on the adjacent conservation areas where the selected field crop is separated from CRP by another conservation area, such as a tree-lined windbreak. So you have your selected field, your CRP, and your windbreak all right next to each other. In this situation, both conservation areas would be associated with the field and included in the field boundaries when drawn. The screening questions should be completed based on the selected crop field. In this case was going to be our final CRP scenario discussed today, and it is the reverse, the selected field from the previous example. The selected field of CRP is separated from a crop field by a conservation practice, that windbreak. If the selected field, where X marks the spot, is CRP, answer the NRI application questions as we have previously discussed for CRP. Moving to a new conservation area practice, riparian buffers. In this example, the riparian buffer is that vegetative area located along the river or stream, and the NRI point has fallen in it. So let's take a look at that area closer. In this situation, the area you want to reference with the respondent, because the X falls clearly in that riparian buffer, is the riparian buffer. Answer the questions based on the riparian buffer only. That's what you want to include in any boundary drawings. And again, that riparian buffer is considered continuous conservation cover, so think CRP, and the point will be ineligible for phase 2. What happens if the NRI point falls in a field adjacent to the riparian buffer? So a slight twist on what we just talked about. In this situation, the buffer is considered conservation area associated with the field and would be included when you draw the field boundary. And the screening questions will be answered based on the selected crop field. So far, we have discussed conservation areas adjacent to the selected field. What happens when the respondent identifies a conservation area that is close, but not adjacent to the field? If there is a conservation area that is identified by the respondent and you are unsure how to include it or to exclude it, include it. And then follow up explaining the situation in a comment. When reviewing your work, you notice a university research farm name or a tribal name. Remember, this survey is area-based, and your goal is to find the respondent that manages and operates the land marked by the X. All operator and owner types are eligible to participate in the survey. Regardless of the operator type, complete the screener based on the selected field.
Now is a good time to note a small number of selected fields were not on record with FSA. These records did not generate a FSA listing sheet. NASS staff researched a best contact. That information will be in CAPI. If you find an aerial image without an FSA listing, check CAPI for the contact information. This will be a rare occurrence. Most enumerators will have an FSA listing to reference for every aerial image.
Now we are moving on to pastures. When the NRI point is in a field that was planted to a perennial crop and used as permanent cropland pasture, only grazing, never cut for hay. You'll identify that field as pasture and complete the screener. The example on the screen is going to define as permanent pasture since the field was not tilled, planted, and harvested on a regular basis. What happens if they occasionally cut the pasture for hay? The respondent tells you they only plan to pasture that field just to graze livestock, but on occasion they have harvested for hay. The last time was 3 years ago. You should consider this permanent pasture. That is how they are managing this field, and complete the screener questions accordingly. Let's discuss another twist on the pastured field. The NRI point landed in a field that was planted to winter wheat in the fall. They planted that wheat intentionally to have the land for livestock to graze in the spring. Once the cattle were done grazing, the field was planted to another crop. What do you do? This point would be considered cultivated cropland because it was planted for the 2025 crop year, even though it was only grazed. This is an intended planting and grazing decision as part of a planned crop rotation. You would complete the screener, mark the field as a field planted to wheat. What happens when the X falls in idle land? The respondent could plant a crop but does not. If there is no crop in the current year or all 3 years, the field is considered idle. Complete the screener questions for an idle land field. The field containing the NRI point, so X marks the spot, includes multiple crops. Think of it as the east half was corn and the west half was hay. Should the crop that the X falls on be drawn as its own field? When you encounter multiple crops in the same field, how do you proceed? First, identify if the crops are considered in the same field by the operator. The boundary you draw should represent how the operator manages that field. It is possible to draw the boundary around both crops or one crop. You need to follow the respondent's lead. Note, when you come back for the follow-on phase 2 survey, you are going to complete that survey for the crop that has the majority of the field or the most cultivated crop. So you would choose a row crop or small grains over hay as an example. Center pivot fields refer to a field where the irrigation system makes a circle as it goes around the field. If you encounter this type of field, first identify where the X landed. Did it land in the circle or in a corner or other area outside the circle? Next, identify the operator that is managing that land marked by the X. It's possible that farmer A farms the circle and farmer B farms the corners, and you are looking for the operator that is managing the crops planted in the area marked by the X. So if the X falls in the center pivot circle, do not include the field corners in the field boundary. And if the X falls outside the center pivot circle, do not include the circle in the field boundaries. We are going to pivot our conversation from fields to a discussion of the definition of sod for the CEAP survey. For the CEAP survey, sod is defined as cultivated crop. So think of the grass in your yard, so grass and a little bit of the soil that is beneath it that holds the roots together and that you would buy in a roll and put in your yard, put on sports fields, golf courses. That's the definition of sod. So enumerators across the country came up with different ways farmers use the word sod, and we are going to talk through those. In the first sod case, the operator tells you that I graze livestock on that sod field. The first item to remember is the definition of sod. Then ask the follow-up question to the respondent. Do you consider that field pasture? In this situation, you will complete the screening questions, identifying the selected field as pasture. A slight change again to the definition of sod across the United States is producers tell you that the field is sod through NRCS, and this could be two situations. They have a CRP or an EQIP contract, which requires a specific grass species being planted. Those fields are not managed and harvested as described in the sod definition given previously. Another scenario where a farmer could be planting sod through NRCS would be a grass waterway or other erosion control effort within or adjacent to the field. And if the point lands in that conservation area, answer the screening questions for that conservation area, similar to if the point landed in a riparian buffer. The bottom line I want you to take away is with a little probing and a follow-up question to verify the situation. If the producer indicates sod as the crop and use the enumerator, remember the definition of sod being more the grass and turf industry. Just remember, complete the screener based on what you identify is happening in the field. In our last sod scenario, the respondent tells you a winter rye was planted as a cover crop in the selected field. Again, remember the definition of sod. It's grass and the part of the soil beneath that is held together by its roots. If the farmer is planting cover crops as part of a crop rotation, screen the field as cropland. When you return for phase 2, you can probe and identify the actual cover crop that was planted and complete the survey for that field. All right, my takeaway messages. I want you to review your aerial images before you start your interview. Consult your coach if you are unsure how to proceed. Find the operator for the selected field. Be curious, ask follow-up questions. And remember that CEAP focuses on cultivated cropland. So when the data collection is done, NRCS will combine the information from the CEAP Farmer Survey and the NRI database, which contains information about soils and climate, to create a picture of the environmental and management conditions associated with the selected fields. Conservation practice benefits will then be estimated using environmental models, and these models will aid in estimating the reduction in soil erosion and nitrogen, phosphorus, and pesticide runoff from each sampled field. That information is combined with data from other sampled fields to produce an estimate of the impact specific conservation practices have for an area or a watershed.
All right, thank you. So do we have any questions so far? All right, quiet group. Well, Joseph, I guess we can go ahead and go on to.
I do.
Okay.
Excuse me. So I have contour fields and I didn't feel like this was answered completely um, in that. So I would include the strips of grass between the contour field, but not anything around it. Is that, or would I draw each individual contour out because it's the same field?
So when you say contour, are you talking about strip cropping where they have like maybe corn and then soybeans?
No,
in?
no, contour farming like on the side of a hill.
Okay.
They're like maybe 3 pass strips and then along the contours of the land.
But it's all the same crop and they just have
Yep.
grass strips
Yep.
in between. So they have grass terraces. Is that what?
Yeah, they aren't quite terraces, but yeah.
Yeah, I would include all of the entire field. So draw off the entire field.
Okay.
And then that would be, if it is like a grass terrace, that would be one of the conservation practices. If this point is selected for phase 2, then that would be a conservation practice that you would indicate they have.
Okay. And then I had one other question. I was reviewing my imagery and I have a couple fields that extend past the square where we have the where we can draw the map. Is that, I just follow the edges of the imagery then?
I think in other trainings we have, if I understand correctly, that you can zoom out just a little bit on the.
I zoomed out and it's just gray.
Okay. So what we've been telling people is to go ahead and draw the boundary, and then where you can't see anymore, where it goes to the gray part, just kind of estimate where where it would be and just draw it out in the gray area.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. We have time for one more question if anybody has one. All right, Joseph. Oh, hold on. Could you reiterate what qualifies phase one to become phase two? Somebody like to tackle that one?
Um, Go ahead, Evelyn. You will have a better answer than I will.
Maybe you might be able to add to it. So for phase one, we are definitely looking for a cropland point. So it needs to be cropped in this current year. So if it is eligible or deemed eligible, then we also look at, does that farmer have other points or other fields that are eligible? And then, and I'm not the one that chooses. We have a group that looks at these different points. If there's multiple fields per farmer, then they decide which one field will be selected for phase two for that particular farmer. So that's, it has to be a cropland field, and then it's one per operator.
All right, thank you. Time code today is CEAP, which is 912. Yes, 9. I'm sorry, 912. All right, Joseph, do you want to go ahead and start the next one?
Bill Fredericks from Kansas, Northeast Kansas.
Patty Maxwell from Central North Dakota.
Ruth Wojan from Northwest Iowa.
What is your pitch for CEAP?
CEAP is actually a fairly easy, is an easy survey to sell. Most farmers understand about soil conservation. I think the thing I didn't understand, what was the 2018 Farm Bill provided what, $29.5 billion towards conservation practices. So I think that's a figure you can use. So you say, what did we get for the $29.5 billion we gave to farmers? NRCS, this is an NRCS project, and they want to see if there has been changes in the way you farm, the way you put on fertilizer.
It is for the NRCS. It is part of a longer survey. And then when we get to the phase two, I try and explain that this is your way of letting them know that you are responsible with your chemicals you use. You do care about conservation. You are using the practices you should be using within, economic reason, because some of these programs are expensive for you to use, and we just want, this is your way to show that you are being responsible. Otherwise, they just assume you're using full rates and tilling up everything you can till up. This way, we show that that is not the case. And that's usually what these surveys show when we get the final data.
When planning routes, what has helped you be efficient?
What I do personally and what I encourage my enumerators to do is, if you're going out in person, is I clump them up by address. So if I have 25 CEAP to do, I sort of break it up. Is it north of Highway 36? What goes through here is Highway 36. Highway 99 goes north and south. 75 goes north and south. 77 goes north and south. And so you kind of put it in quadrants. And I write on those packets, the address is there, and I'll say it's 4 miles northwest of Hiawatha, or it's southeast of Corning. So I know, well, all I have to do is look at the packet, and I know where I'm going.
Okay, when I talk about planning, I make sure the assignments are in front of me, look at the maps, and know accordingly where you're going to be going. Sometimes if no one's there, you can backtrack after on the way back, but be sure to know your assignments and then talk to the operators of the farm.
Best tool I have found for mapping routes is the route mapping in CAPI. You can choose up to 10 operators and it will map your route for you. It is super easy. You just push the little boxes and push map route. And it shows you what order, the best order to take them in. I then align up my paper assignments in the order they show me. And I get in my car and that's the route I take. And it, of course, this time of year, there's always detours and whatnot, but typically it is the best way to go. It saves me all kinds of time. I don't have to look at maps. I don't have to look at plot books and look at these up. It takes all the work out of it. And that's what I do.
When on the phone, what advice do you have for identifying the selected field, conservation, and drawing off the field boundaries?
It is very difficult to do these on the phone, but if it's the only way to get it done, I think it's important to have studied it in advance to know what it looks like in your own mind, and to know the township and segment number. Those in the past have been on there. Also, try and find the roads where it's the corner of 280th Avenue and 20th Street or whatever. So you can tell them that, or it's the middle 40 or whatever you can, the best description you can give them. Also, if you can see anything on the map, well, there's this big grove of trees there, or any of those kind of identifiers that you can see on the map. You can have them go online, assuming they can do that and look at the map. My experience is not very many farmers are able to do that, but you might find one or two. So if you do get them on the phone, I would try to do it on the phone first. If it's just not working for you, maybe make an appointment and go see them at a different time.
Say you're going to see somebody and you can't find this guy at home, but you can drive by that field. I'll do that too. So you have an idea of what the field lays like, so you can give the operator a little better idea. As much detail as I can give them, I do.
Do you have any tips for working in the NRI application website?
Okay, make sure that you're familiar with the screener. Practice, know your ID number and your point number when you're ready to go into a screen, and practice drawing off the X on the field and make sure you're pretty accurate. And then you can also, when you do go to the farmer, they can redraw it if it's not quite right.
Just practice on it, so you're sure of yourself about picking the right point, trying to draw a semblance of the field, that kind of stuff. But I think if you just go there several times and actually do it, it's not a fearsome thing.
My biggest thing is take your time. Be patient with yourself. Don't be in a rush. It'll get done. Make sure you have the right point. Sometimes laying the iPad down on the desk or some solid surface is a little more helpful than trying to do it up in the air. Use a stylus.
How do you convey that you might be coming back for phase 2?
Someone will be coming back later and ask more extensive questions. And if they want me to expand on that, I will.
Okay, I make sure to explain to the producer that we will be coming back in person to talk about the cropping histories, fertilizer applications, etc. on that field, because it will be a little bit longer than the phase 1 that we did.
I just say, well, I will be back in a couple months with a more detailed survey. It will ask for a lot more information, so we'll probably just try and set up an appointment at that time, and that's how I leave it. I just let them know that I will be back with the more detailed survey. I don't get into all the other stuff because I don't want to scare them right away.
The only comment I have, this survey in particular, the more research you do and the more prep you do for this survey, it's much easier.
Well, I think phase one is a lot easier than phase two. I mean, because basically, like we've said, you're just trying to identify the operator of the field. Either you are, and then you're going to, get the little bit of other information, which is nothing. And if they're not, then you're going to have to see if they know who is. If they don't, you're going to have to do some more research. But that's the most important thing in this part.
Be confident in what you're doing, not just going and knocking on the door and then not knowing what you're doing. If you know the survey, you can sell it. No, I bring cookies and caramel rolls, and that always breaks the ice.
I used to tell people that farmers would sell their soul for a 12-pack of Bud Light. So
I know, and when they came out with John Deere beer, gosh, if we could have gave them that, we'd have had them right there.
All right, thanks. So we had a comment, just a reminder, remember the difference between the crop year and calendar year. That doesn't always, different crops, that flows differently. Then we had another question: what information will the operators be sent? And they were sent a pre-survey letter, and it is posted out to the NASDA survey page. So that's where you can see what the pre-survey letter said. Are we sure to get the survey in phase 2 if we do phase 1? That sounds like a NAS question.
Hey, yeah, I can check that. So even if you go through phase 1 and they are marked as eligible, and let's say that's the only point that this particular operator has, they don't have multiple points, just the one, it is still not guaranteed that they will be selected for phase 2. NRCS goes through and picks picks who I'm not entirely sure, maybe NRCS if they want to chime in, but I know Evelyn was just saying earlier that they have a team that goes through and selects which points will be selected for phase 2. So
All right, thanks. And then we had a question about texting them a picture of the map. The answer is yes, as long as the NRI point is not included. So it needs to be stripped of anything that's identifiable. And then a follow-on comment, Rhonda, I'm going to need some clarification on what you meant by that. Okay, you can reach out to me later on that. Are there any other questions? All right, well, let's go ahead and let's see. I believe we have one more. One more, is that right?
I'm all out of videos, so if you want
You're
me
all
to
out of
put on a
videos. Oh,
song
it's
and
my
dance
turn
or
now.
something, I could try, but I think it's up to you.
Oh boy. Well, let's see if we can not start coughing. All right, let me share my screen.
Gene, I have one more question. This is Stephanie Sparks.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the video where the enumerators shared their best practices, we talked about the billions of dollars that were allocated to conservation practices in the 2018 Farm Bill. I have a number of operators who say, well, how can I get that money? And how is that going to be facilitated if the current Farm Bill isn't approved?
That sounds like an NRCS question.
I'm not sure exactly what will happen if we do not get the next Farm Bill approved, but you can definitely point them to their local NRCS office to have a discussion with those folks about different conservation practices that they can apply on their land, that they can get funding for, or even just technical assistance for.
Okay, that would be great if, I don't know if the managers would be able to provide that information for the local NRCS offices. I don't know how to identify those.
You should be able to, they should just be able to go to just Google NRCS, and on that website, there should be a way to locate their local office.
Okay, thank you.
Gene, I wanted to ask a question.
Yes.
It's Lynette Davis from Wyoming. I have found that not just with CEAP, but with a lot of our surveys, some of our farmers just don't have access to some of the information that we have information on, like some of the areas we have drought areas currently. And so right now USDA is doing basically a hay thing where they're supplementing money into where the cattle are they're in a drought area, so they can access that money. So I was able to tell one of the guys that, and he was like really grateful for that. He said, and he gave me all the information for the survey I was doing for the cattle, because I was able to help him out with the whole hay thing. So I think that sometimes we need to sort of be like that extra step. We need to sort of try to help them out, if they need it. Now, I don't do that with everybody, but sometimes, they just need to know that there's extra services out there. And I try to keep on top of what's going on. I listen to USDA and all that information all the time.
All right. No, that all sounds good. And there's nothing wrong, pointing them out towards help or anything else. Um, never commit, because obviously, we don't make those types of decisions. But, as far as like, providing them with, local FSA, NRCS, or whatever it be contacts, no, that's perfectly good. And you're right. Sometimes it's, some of the folks struggle finding that. So no, that's a good help. Um, let's see, is my screen sharing?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to go through now just kind of a few NASDA items. So pre-data collection prep. These are some items we recommend for y'all to do before you go out into the field. Organize your paperwork before attempting any interviews. Find out, does the operator have more than one point? Be familiar with where that field location is, and make sure you review any other survey operators. Data collection methods. So we are hopeful that we can do that. It'll be all face to face. Obviously, if an operator refuses to meet face to face but is willing to do it over the phone, give it your best shot, but try to make every effort to do it in person. You need a minimum of 6 contact attempts before submitting an operation is inaccessible. First contact, make that face to face. Do some phone attempts, 3 of them. Try the morning, noon, evening to set up an appointment, and then try another face to face. And then at that point, if you still haven't reached it, you might contact your coach and get a few ideas between the two of y'all come up with for the 6th contact attempt. Visiting the operators. Where possible, because not always is it going to be possible, where possible, try to visit more than 5 operators per drive. Plan your route, group operators together. Look at CEAP and other surveys. So it doesn't necessarily have to be all fiber CEAP. It could be you're just making a drive out and it's, some CEAP and some APS, and, a little bit later in the year, we're going to have other surveys. And so there'll be some additional stuff. Then of course, if you have some additional time, maybe you can swing by and hit up somebody you weren't expecting. And then make sure you have all your materials with you. I know for me, that's always a big one, making sure I got my stuff with me, because frequently I turn around and head back to the house to get all the stuff I forgot. If you need new contact information, so here's one idea you can use is True People Search. It is a internet site that you can go to and look up some information, um, and see what you can find there. If you're unsuccessful, you can submit a address and phone lookup. Those are going to be located out under the NASDA regional page. I currently have the link that I just got, and I am going to be sending that out today. Make sure you include not only the POID, but the state FIPS code. So, for instance, Oregon's 41, California's 6, Washington's 53. Those are the ones I remember off the top of my head. So make sure you include that and then the 9-digit code. And then up to 5 POIDs can be submitted per form, and indicate whether you're looking for the address, the phone, or both of them. Timeline expectations. So data collection is going to run August 1 through September 26th. These are the official timelines here. So make sure you write that down. Do not use whatever it says in CAPI. Those dates may not be correct. This is the correct dates. All attempts must be entered into CAPI contact attempts. So make sure each day you are recording your contact attempts. Even your field visits, make sure those are getting recorded. They're going to be monitored, and that's going to determine how we're looking at progress, how work is distributed, everything. So make sure it's being done. If less than 3 attempts by September 1, managers will be contacting you to look at reassigning work. So this is where it's important that you make sure you're recording your contact attempts for that. Mapping features. So you can do mapping in CAPI, and that will be based upon the operator's address. You can also do mapping with the NRI screening tool. That is based upon the field's actual location. So it's two different things, but kind of gives you an idea of, you can kind of figure out where the operator is and figure out where the field is, and get differing information to use to help you plan your trips as you head out into the field. Submitting data. NRI screening tool, you're going to want to submit the questionnaire and the map. Very important here. Do not submit operator information in the NRI screening tool. No PII. So we submit the questionnaire, the map, but no PII. CAPI, submit after NRI screening tool. So we're going to do this as second step. Update the operator contact information with any necessary comments. And here's kind of a guide of giving you an idea who to call depending on the problem. So if you have a timesheet or assignment issue, call your manager. If you have a survey or data collection issue or questions, contact your coach. If you have an NRI system issue or questions, or you're locked out of your iPad, CAPI, or iSolved, reach out to your trainer. This is not an all-inclusive list, but it kind of gives you an idea of who's probably going to be the person that will have the highest likelihood of having the answer. And of course, if they don't have the answer, they will start calling around and Somebody will get an answer. Project code, just a reminder, is 912. And now I was going to go through the comments here. Comment, I thought we weren't supposed to encourage them on programs. I would say we're not. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was like, you're not necessarily encouraging them. If they ask for questions, that is just so you can give them additional resources.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say don't suggest it to them, but then if they reach out to you about we're trying to do this or we don't know where to go, things like that, then at that point you can volunteer whatever information you had there. Let's see. Not seeing our assignments on CAPI. When we'll be able to see our CEAP assignments on CAPI? Yes, everybody's CAPI assignments were taken away. No, they will not be back for a while until after the work with the NOD and putting the packets together is done. So it's going to be a little bit longer. When will the materials get out here? We kind of covered that, but they are hopefully going to be here no later than August 1 and hopefully a little bit sooner. Do we need to request our field trips with our managers? I would suggest talking with your coaches on field trips. You know, doing that. I do request anytime you go to the field that you let your coach know. The main reason being is if you don't come home, we have an idea of where to send help. And that's actually being a very serious statement. So, when you head out, always let someone know where you're going. As far as planning the trips, that is something you'll want to talk with your coaches, and coaches maybe talk with their managers and figure out how they want to handle those types of things. That is going to be kind of a decision that they're going to be making. Is it normal to feel a bit overwhelmed at this part, or am I up to challenge? No, I think you're up. I think you're up for it. It is perfectly fine to feel overwhelmed. I'll be perfectly honest. I feel overwhelmed every time any of the big surveys start, and I've done this a while. So it's perfectly normal. Once you get out there and you get doing it, it really comes to you like it really pulls it all together. I think that is. Can I show the date slide again? Yes. If I find it. Ah. Can y'all see that? I think that worked. All right. So any other questions that y'all have? We got one. I assume we cannot start practice on CAPI training until we receive the package. No.
You should be in practicing right now. You don't need to have a point that is specifically assigned to you, but once you get done watching the videos and get your access, you should be in NRI training doing that practice. Training will disappear on August 1st once data collection begins.
Question, what amount of time can we study while on payroll? Have we sent out a study guide sheet listing times? 2 hours. Sorry about that. Any other questions? All right, so we will this video was recorded. We will be posting it, and now that I know who to contact, the postings will go out a whole lot faster. And can we list the website for training again? Can you be more specific? Are we talking the training app, or are we talking like training materials type site?
Probably videos is what they're after.
No, I was looking on my iPad. I'm unable to log on to the nrisurvey.org.ceap 2025/training. And I'm wondering if I had that correct. But this is something I can check on later.
Yes, and I sent out the links via email today to the managers, and they're going to kick it out to their people. I would suggest using the links provided because they tend to work a little more, they're less quirky, I'll say.
Okay, so I can plan on getting a better link. Okay.
Yes. And they were working when I sent them. I tested them as of this morning.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Any other questions or comments? Like I said, this will be posted probably today or tomorrow. It'll be out on the Mountain West Region website there. And I will also include a link to the manager so everybody can just have a quick access to it. All right. Well, with that, I guess that brings this to an end. We're going to go ahead and stop recording. And I want to thank everybody